Welcome to this session of Vanilla SE. Maybe it's going to be a bit of a vanilla swirl. This one's going to be different than usual because today my guests are Floof and Senator Kiwi, both of whom are experienced street epistemologists. So I'm going to sit back and help moderate the questions from the crowd to butt in. We're going to let them talk to each other and swap roles around as often as they like and as they're willing to. But first, Floof, could you tell us some things about yourself? Introduce yourself to us.
Hi, my alias on here is Floof. I got introduced to this topic we'll be talking about a couple years ago, and it made me reevaluate a lot of my life, and also whenever I talked to trans people about it, they told me that it wasn't accurate. So I did a deep dive into it just because I had to be certain about this topic we're going to talk about, and yeah, so.
Cool. Thank you. Okay, Senator Kiwi.
About me. So I have been into street epistemology for probably about 6 months. So if you're saying that I'm an experienced street epistemologist, I don't know about all that. But I have also been transitioning for about 6 years. And so AGP is something that I am familiar with just because of like the amount of time that I've been either like completely transitioning or been interested in doing it. So, so I think it's interesting that with street epistemology, it's a good way to bring up these topics and kind of approach them, because when it comes to AGP or somebody's identity, there's a lot of emotions that are kind of floating around. And so we're trying to get to like the heart of, okay, emotions to the side, what's actually going on here? What does the science say? That kind of thing.
Thank you. So I think I haven't even asked you to work this out ahead of time. Which of you would like to make a claim for the other first?
That's a good question. I guess I can make a positive claim. Well, I guess it's a negative claim, which is to say that I don't believe that the Blanchard Autogynephilia theory is correct, which is the same one as the last time that we were talking. For anybody who doesn't know, Blanchard is the name of a scientist. He's the one who pretty much put this theory together. Autogynephilia means the attraction to oneself as a woman. It's a Latin term that he kind of put together. And then, of course, the theory, sometimes you might see the acronym as the BAT, or BAT.
Okay. Did you, when you first encountered this idea, did you believe that it was not accurate as well?
I think that I probably didn't believe that it was accurate at that time. When I first encountered it, it was probably a couple of years ago. But there were kind of like, I don't know how to describe it. There were like hit pieces, I guess, out for Bailey at that time. So I was running into those kinds of things. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's kind of the exposure. Did you want to get, so I'm trying to think of like what the best way to do this is, right? So I'm thinking, did you want, I gave a claim, do you want to also give a claim, or should maybe we get us like a scale of certainty, or?
I guess I'll like say my claim too, so that we both have ours up there. My claim is that the two-type typology that was formalized by Blanchard in 1989 is accurate enough that we might as well call it accurate. It's good, and yeah, it's pretty solid, and it's in line with the previous sexology research.
Okay. And you said before that you're at about a 99% confidence. So is that still the case?
Yeah.
Gotcha. Can I ask you a personal question? It might not necessarily be like street epistemology necessarily. And just because you had asked about kind of my experience and that kind of thing, how long ago did you run into Autogynephilia versus like how long ago did you run into trans ideation? You know?
You mean like ideas about transgender stuff?
Yeah, I guess my question is, have you always had like questions about your gender and that sort of thing, or did you find out about AGP recently and then that kind of made you understand it a little bit better recently?
I had a gender euphoria experience in winter of 2013, and it made me confused about whether or not I was transgender for like a year or so, and it was constantly on my mind. And then I successfully repressed it for some time, and it came back up a couple years ago after I'd had some conversations with a former romantic partner about this sort of stuff, and she thought what I was saying was problematic about transgender stuff. So I looked up the science of transsexualism afterwards to like make sure I wasn't saying anything that was inaccurate or hurtful, you know. And then I found out like, oh shit, this describes me.
Okay. So just so that I understand, when you were talking with this romantic partner, I guess maybe I'm a little confused as to what kind of things were you saying at that point, or like what's
I mean, I believe in like, I'm skeptical about social constructionism kind of in general, and I lean towards biological essentialism. So that was like at the root of the disagreement.
Okay, gotcha. I think we can agree on that actually, because I'm not a big fan. Anytime that somebody says, "Oh, it's all culture based," I'm not really into that as much.
Yeah, I think people like to forget that we're apes.
Yeah, exactly. I'm very much a believer that your neuroendocrine system and that kind of thing is kind of running the show. So I think that is another thing that you and I might like connect with.
Yeah. So yeah, that's just how I got introduced to this stuff. I had some contentious discussions, and I looked up the science of transsexualism, because I was curious about it for myself as well. So I looked it up. I found the concept of Autogynephilia in Alice Drager's book, Galileo's Middle Finger. And then I read Bailey's book, and then I looked up more stuff online. And then like, I was pretty sure that I was like, by this, if I look back at my Amazon order history at this time, I think I decided that I was AGP because I started buying women's clothing around this time. And like a month later, I was pretty certain about it after reading Anne Lawrence's book, Men Trapped in Men's Bodies. It's the single best book on the topic.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good. I'm glad that you mentioned all that to me, just because it gives me a better kind of understanding of your timeline and that sort of thing. So that might be helpful going forward.
Yeah.
My question for you is, because I know that you mentioned that you had read a lot of books on the topic and this type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
If you were to, let's say, Well, I guess my main question is, with the number of instances of we call it like transvestic arousal and that sort of thing, how that is showing up, and you're seeing a lot of instances of it. I read that the couple of chapters about ionism that you sent me, and those kinds of things.
Ellis's book. Yeah, ionism.
So there's a lot of instances of people having transvestic arousal, and it sounds like that is kind of more affirming the AGP theory as correct for you. Am I correct about that?
Yeah, it's people often see the clothing because that's visible, but it's ultimately the clothing is just one aspect of cross-gender arousal as a broader phenomenon. Because like you imagining that they're the other gender or something like that, but clothing is up.
Yeah, so there's transvestic arousal, as we call it, which is like clothing based, and then even beyond that, sometimes we call it like narrow sense AGP. Have you heard of that before?
Yeah, I'm familiar with Tails lingo. Is that where you got that?
Yeah, I like that one. But so there's these beyond transvestic arousal. There's these other, like, I don't even know the word for it, like proclivities or something that you can be like attracted to, which could be like imagining yourself with boobs or something like that. So if we say transvestic arousal, can we kind of use that as encompassing all those things, do you think?
No, because that's clothing. I would say like cross-gender arousal, and that's a term Julia Serrano used in her like 2010 essay against Autogynephilia. She used cross-gender arousal as a term. That's like you could also call it autogynephilic arousal.
Okay, yeah. I'll try to use either one of those.
Whichever one. We know what you mean now that you've talked about it.
Yeah. So there is this phenomenon of a lot of it sounds like a lot of males having this cross-gender. Say it for me one more time. It's cross-gender.
Cross-gender arousal.
Cross-gender arousal. Let me write that down.
Yeah, it's just like, cross-gender instead of like transvestic. You just switch out that word.
Okay, because if I don't write it down, I'm going to forget it. So cross-gender arousal is happening. It's a phenomenon that is it's happening. And since you've seen it historically happening, you're recognizing that is that it makes it the theory more sound.
Yeah, it makes it think logical in origin because it shows up across the generations in a very consistent pattern. That's why I attribute it more to essentialist causes rather than social constructionism, because it appears across different cultures and times in a very similar form.
Is it possible at all that women could experience cross-gender arousal?
Are you talking about imagining themselves as men?
Yes.
Yeah, autoandrophilia is real. Yeah, I've talked to some autoandrophiles, and it matches sort of the depictions I've seen in the literature. Because there's a few instances in the literature, not many, but where they talk about autoandrophilia, or rather just transvestism in females was what they termed it.
Okay. Instead of autoandrophilia necessarily, which, as we said, that's attraction for people who are assigned female at birth. They are attracted to themselves as the image of males. Instead of that, is it possible for a cisgender woman to be aroused or have fantasies about herself as a cisgender woman?
Yeah, it's possible, and I've definitely seen some narratives of that people writing their experiences, because this gets brought up, autogynephilia in women, as like sort of a counter to the typology. and it does seem to happen. I don't think it's been measured clearly, like in terms of to know what exactly that constitutes, and if it is the same phenomenon that happens in males, and also what percentage of the population it happens in, because it would be invisible, you know, because they're already female. There would be no outer change.
If you saw some type of study that suggested that that was the case, where cisgender women are aroused by the thought of themselves as cisgender women, would that move your confidence at all?
Are you referring to Mosier's study?
Not necessarily, because I know that his wasn't it wasn't extremely robust, you know? Yeah. I'm saying if you had more robust studies in general, and then also more examples of it, would that move the needle for you at all?
It would move the needle in terms of believing that autogynephilia also happens in females. That seems like a separate question to me of it happening in males, because if it was happening in females, that would be auto-homo. You know, that would be like attracted to being the same gender, which would be like, see, like I consider myself like auto-heterosexual, right? Attracted to being the other sex. And if a female was attracted to being female, that would be like auto-homosexual, you know? But you can't see that from, like, you can't see that someone's imagining themselves as like their own gender or anything like that, because they'd still wear the same clothes, still do the same things.
I guess I'm trying to understand, because if you say that you can't see it, you know, if there was any other measure that we could use, something like finding the spot in your brain that says, hey, you're aroused right now, and then, you know, finding that and then showing that they are aroused at those types of fantasies, or what we would consider for you and me cross-gender arousal style fantasies happening in cis women. If they could show that, or maybe like the female equivalent of philometry, which I think is still also called philometry for women, maybe not.
Yeah.
Yeah, if those kinds of things could be measured, do you think that would that move the needle at all on your claim that the theory is sound enough?
Yeah, I think that's tangential to the theory, because it wouldn't lead to transsexualism, first of all. And yeah, I guess even for that alone, that seems like tangential to the claims about transsexualism.
Hold on 1 second.
Yeah.
I'm learning a lot of words. Thank you for this.
So you said that it's tangential. So you're saying that they're kind of like not the same thing, right? That for someone who's assigned male to experience this thing, and even if cisgender women or women who are assigned female at birth are experiencing the exact same thing, it wouldn't really change anything for you, because they're like fundamentally not the same thing.
Right, because say that females experience autogynephilia in exactly the same way that males do, that is exactly the same phenomenon. That would be autohomosexuality, which I consider different from autoheterosexuality. There's different implications and outcomes.
Gotcha. So, and one of the outcomes that you mentioned was that they wouldn't have like a need to transition.
Right. They already pulled it off, you know?
Right. If I'm sorry. I was just trying to think of the best kind of direction to go.
We love aporia. Stopping to think is very SE.
Yes, I'm just as a disclaimer, I'm going to need to do that a couple of times. I'm very like scatterbrained. I guess I'm curious as to why you think that it's that these two phenomenon are so separated from one another. And the reason why I say that is because if you ask, your average trans woman who's not really familiar with AGP and this type of thing, I'd be willing to bet that a lot of them would say that it's identity based. And so if we were to just assume for a moment, which I know is a kind of a big ask, but if you were to assume that a trans woman is actually has the gender experience as female, and they're actually feeling female and this kind of thing, then would the experience that a cisgender female experiencing cross-gender arousal, and then someone who's assigned male at birth but identifies as female, to me, those are both the same phenomenon. Does that make sense?
Even though they're different sexes?
Even though they're different sexes, yes, because the genders are going to be the same in this case.
Yeah, the target gender is the same. But yeah, I guess, because the sexes are different, that's why I differentiated between autoheterosexuality and autohomosexuality, because they just lead to different outcomes. Like if say women were attracted to themselves, like just to the idea of being a woman, like say there's women that found it hot just the fact that they're women, that wouldn't result in transsexualism.
I think we lost Floof a second there.
Now you're beside yourself.
Okay. Yeah, just that it wouldn't camera? Oh, is the camera off now?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Turn on camera. Okay.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, you've swapped sides.
Nice.
Oh, well.
All right.
Uh-oh. Senator Kiwi is frozen on one side.
Hold on a second. Should I drop and come back in?
I think that's up to production.
Okay, I'll give him a second.
Yeah, did what I said before I thought I was cut off make any sense?
It's I'll be honest with you, it's still kind of confusing me. I think is what you're trying to say that they're gonna be fundamentally two different phenomenons, and then in the assigned male at birth category, that leads to transsexualism, so it's important, whereas for cisgender women who experience the same thing, if they experience the same thing, it's not as important because there's no like change your gender end game.
Right. Yeah. Even if we grant that it's the exact same phenomenon that the males and females are having, that there is no difference, it still would lead to different implications. So because there's no potential transsexualism from being attracted to the sex that you are, it's not necessarily it doesn't seem relevant to the typology to me, just because it can't lead to transsexualism.
Okay, so it can't lead to transsexualism, so it's not relevant.
Well, it's an interesting question in its own right, but it's almost like separate from whether or not the typology is accurate.
Okay, and I'm just trying to I guess wrap my head around that as best I can. So maybe another way to say is like the normalcy, right? So if cisgender women are experiencing this, and there are some folks who are assigned male at birth who identify as female and are also experiencing this. I guess you're trying to say that the it kind of like affirms the typology in a way. And I guess my question is, how did you determine that it's abnormal for people who are assigned male at birth?
It's not that it's abnormal, because I mean, fairly moderate strengths of autogynephilia in males are, I'd say, roughly around 3% of the population of males, which is on par with homosexuality. So it's way more common than people give it credit for. So yeah, it's.
I know even Dolly mentioned, last time that, okay, he would have those kinds of experiences, but didn't necessarily, like, he doesn't want to transition. So it's
right.
I know.
So I qualify under one component but not the other, and so I think it hasn't cost me much. It seems like a feature, not a bug.
If you're not suffering, that's good.
Yeah, I'm not suffering from it. I'm turned on by weird things, and I'm happy about that.
Yeah, same. Yeah, like that's an example. Like, say, like Dolly, if they've experienced some sort of cross-gender arousal before relating to clothing, like it doesn't make someone trans. People disagree about what even makes someone trans. There's, but just simply being aroused by something doesn't make you transgender. It's more of like about what actions you take towards it, whether or not you transition or whether or not your feelings are strong about it.
I just want you to remember that when I was young, I was an active cyclist and kept my legs shaved. It was very pretty.
Gotcha.
Yeah, did that feel good to shave your legs?
Oh yeah, and I'm not going to get into it because it would distract.
Yeah, no, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
I think the last question before we had mentioned about Dolly there. What was that last question that I asked you? It was based off of like the normalcy of it. This paraphilia happens within 3% of the male population. A portion of those decide to transition, assuming that the taxonomy is correct. So if cross-gender arousal is a phenomenon that can lead to some people transitioning and then some people not transitioning, then what what utility does it serve? Given that maybe it happens in cis females as well.
Well, the other type of transsexual, what Blanchard called the homosexual transsexual, that's a subset of gay people, right? Like, not all gay people transition. So likewise, with autogynephilia, only a subset of them will transition as well. And so I think the sexual orientations, homosexuality and autogynephilia, are legitimate in their own right, completely separate from questions of transsexualism. That both those orientations certainly exist.
Okay, I think I see what you're saying there.
could we swap roles? Floof,
Yeah.
Yeah.
would you be so kind as to question Senator's reasons against?
Yeah. I'm curious, what's the strongest evidence you've seen against it? Against the typology?
And that's a good question. It's not necessarily that I have evidence against it. It's that it hasn't reached the, trying to think of the word for it. It hasn't, there's not enough there for me to agree with it.
Okay.
The burden of proof, is that the word that I'm looking for? The phrase that
Right,
I'm looking
yeah,
for? Burden of proof? Hasn't met
Right,
the
there's
burden
not
of proof.
enough evidence. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't see how it is any better of a typology than and Vital's, two-type. She pretty much has a taxonomy for that, and
Yeah, and group 3 was the AGPs. She didn't call them that, but that aligns with AGPs.
yeah, it aligns with AGP in pretty much every functional way. But the only thing is, she pretty much omitted all the paraphilic business in there.
And I think she's AGP etiology, so like I'm not surprised that she omitted that.
Okay, what do you mean by AGP etiology?
That she's aroused by the thought of being a woman.
Oh, okay. So then she would have kind of like an interest in not putting that forward, I guess.
Yeah, like playing it down to get the concern about being accepted by society and not being discriminated against, I think motivates people to play it down.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, so if we were to, you know how in street epistemology there is, you can interview somebody about like pornography as an example. And you could say, okay, I'll give you the laundry list of reasons as to why pornography should be legal, should be okay. Here's the positives to it, all these things. But if they still have like the God belief, then you could go down the whole laundry list. It doesn't matter because that God belief is still like, that's the linchpin. You take the God belief out and then, okay, all this other stuff about pornography maybe. Okay. So what I would like to do is kind of like give you that God belief portion, like the probably give you the deepest thing that I have that I don't agree with AGP.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the assumption that the cross-gender arousal, it's the assumption that I guess that it's important in and of itself, or that it's the cross-gender arousal being there. I don't believe is a good reason to conclude that AGP exists. And I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. If we look at phenomenons, like observed phenomenons versus theories, there you could say that there is the observed phenomenon of I have this pen, I drop it. That's like the phenomenon of gravity. And then you have the theory of relativity to carry it, which, I know that that's not an accurate theory, but just to kind of make things simple. Another one would be like evolution. Okay, well, you could talk about evolution or the theory of evolution. One of them is an observed phenomenon that things change characteristics over time. The other one is the theory itself. I don't believe that the existence of cross-gender arousal is good enough to say, and here's the theory. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. You're like differentiating between, you're saying just because that pattern of sexual arousal exists, that the idea that it can lead to transition does not necessarily follow?
Yes. I'm not saying that it's not present when people transition. I'm saying that it's not I don't believe that that is the cause of or the motivation of what people would consider to be AGP trans to transition.
Yeah, for the record, I don't think it's strictly for sexual arousal either. I think it's more for the emotional effects. So do you not believe that the sexual orientation called Autogynephilia exists?
I think it probably exists for some people. I don't think that it's my experience, so I don't believe that it covers everyone who is attracted to females or bisexual, and that side of the taxonomy.
Yeah. So Autogynephilia does exist, but is not necessarily related to transitioning.
Yes. And not even to say that it's not related to transitioning. It might be. I think that it does happen. Cross-gender arousal happens in a lot of people who do transition. My kind of hypothesis, if you could say, or my understanding of it, is that it would be like a cathartic thing. That's the word that I always come back to. Where if you're growing up and you have I don't like saying culture, but okay, you have a culture that's basically saying, you can't be feminine in any way, shape, or form. Don't do it.
Yeah.
In what ways can you be cathartic about any type of, if we assume that gender identity is like an actual thing, taking that assumption, it makes sense to me that you would use like cross-gender arousal as a cathartic release, because where else could you do it? Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah. But is cathartic release usually associated with erections or arousal?
I guess not always. That's kind of a goofy question, I think. Like maybe trying to think of like other scenarios where someone would be cathartic about something, and the only other thing that I can think of is like listening to live music or something like that.
Right. Yeah, that can trigger piloerection as well. Like goosebumps and the good tingly feelings.
Yeah, those types of things.
Yeah.
Does that help at all?
I think so. I sometimes get lost. I have ADD, so sometimes I get lost.
Yeah, I have it too.
Yeah. Okay, so you agree. Am I correct in saying that you agreed that, like, this cross-gender arousal in males, like what I'm calling autogynephilia, that it exists in some males, but it's not necessarily indicative of like any transsexual outcome or anything like that, or gender identity?
I think that is pretty much exactly what I'm saying. Is that the presence or absence of it doesn't affect whether or not you have any type of gender or identity difference.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think that it is, like I said, it's too much of a leap to say, okay, cross-gender arousal or just autogynephilic feelings, whatever you want to call it, are going to, like, I don't know. You mentioned that it was more of like an emotional thing and that sort of thing.
Yeah. For me, it is. I think it is for a lot of people as well, besides me.
Okay. I know. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, it sort of like explains like why would my brain get happy feelings anytime I thought of myself as feminine or anything reminded me of femininity? Like, why would that even happen in the first place? And that's sort of what the AGP concept seeks to answer, is like, why would those feelings even happen in the first place?
Right. So that question winds up at the answer of because there is a paraphilia here.
Yeah, like a type of heterosexuality that's like, instead of being directed towards others, gets mapped onto your own body.
Okay, so that's the ETLE or the ETII.
Yeah.
Which is erotic target identity inversion. Some people call it that. When Blanchard wrote about it, it was more ETLE, erotic target location error. And just so that I guess anybody who's still watching is like aware, ETLE is this. It's kind of like an assumption that most men look at women and then they would get aroused by like the visual stimulus of that. ETLE basically says, okay, there's something is cross-wired up here, which makes it so that you don't go, look at that. You go, I want to be that. And so ETLE can be used for other kind of paraphilic interests. So you could assign it possibly to furries, and the assumption is like, okay, you are attracted to like bestiality type of things. Maybe you're attracted to dogs, and that's like a crosswire in and of itself. But the ETLE would make it so that, okay, you're attracted to a dog, but there's a crosswire, so now you're attracted to yourself as a dog. For somebody who is into like self-infantilism, attracted to infants like exteriorly, and then the erotic target location inverts that and makes it so that they are attracted to themselves as infants.
Yeah.
I don't buy ETLE at all. I don't think that that is an accurate description of any of those. I don't think that that's what's happening to like furries.
Yeah, I wouldn't say all of them. Some of them, I think, are motivated by that. You know, there's the culture element and community element that have merit.
Can any of the three of us say that word completely clearly? Autoanthropophilia.
Yeah, sorry that word is so long. Autoandrophilia. Yeah.
You did it perfectly. Thank you.
Yeah, we did it justice.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, the ETLE hypothesis. Would you put more credence in that hypothesis if studies had been done on, say, like men that are seeking amputations? If men who are seeking amputations because they had body integrity dysphoria, would, and if you saw a study that said the vast majority of them were sexually attracted to amputees specifically, would that increase your confidence in the ETLE/ETII hypothesis?
It might. The difficulty for me with Autogynephilia, am I pronouncing that right?
I think so. Close enough.
Autogynephilia. I guess my difficulty with that one is like phantom limb and that kind of thing. So I'm not really sure how I feel about that one so much. Just because there are some studies that suggest, and is specifically done for trans men, to show that they have like phantom penile sensations, and those kinds of things. And then also for and anyone who, like, let's say that you're a cisgender male, you lose your penis in war or something like that. and then there's usually phantom limb sensations from that. My thinking is that anybody who wants to like remove their limbs is more in line with the phantom limb kind of opposite of that, where there's mapping in your brain that says like, here's where my finger is, you know, and maybe that is like missing in some ways. So I think that there's more evidence kind of pointing in that direction. So if I saw that somebody was, you know, more attracted to amputees and also wants to amputate themselves, it still makes sense to me that, okay, they're thinking about amputating their own limbs. So it's like, which came first, the chicken or the egg? Did they have this brain, you know, mismatch where, okay, I don't feel as though I should have this hand, and then they start like looking at other people who are missing hands. I'm not familiar with the science on it so much. Long story short is maybe that might change my mind a little bit about ETLE.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, because that was part of what I found convincing when I was reading about it, was that this seemed like a similar phenomenon was happening with different targets of erotic interest. Like, it wasn't just being attracted to women or men; it could be attracted to women, anthropomorphic animals, or like furries, amputees, like that sort of thing. You know.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like I've seen furries talk about species dysphoria, and like, you know, you could laugh like, haha, that's like fake or whatever, but I don't know. It's hard to know.
Yeah, it's hard to know. And that's, I think the difficulty of this is we're kind of like we don't really know territory. So I guess my next question for you, based off of that, hey, we don't really know. Why is it, I don't want to say okay, but if the answer is, okay, we don't really know a whole lot about this stuff, why do you then believe that the theory is correct? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, we may not know a lot about the specifics of ETLE or ETII or how they come about, but there's the sexology research and books and articles, like for over 100 years now, have shown that there's males that are really sexually interested in being women, and also they also develop a deep emotional attachment to it, and the inability to realize that that deep dream of theirs causes them pain later in life. Like that pattern showed up in Hirschfeld's book, for instance, like from 1910. Like there's a bunch of narratives in there, first-hand narratives that are quite long, and they go through the whole lifespan. And the progression process seems to be very similar among all the different cases.
So that still kind of goes back to, you know, the kind of the assumption that the people experiencing this means that like the theory in and of itself has to be correct.
Well, in some of those narratives from back then, like transsexualism didn't even exist yet, right? But some of them would say things like, if I could find a doctor that would be willing to cut off my penis, I would like do anything to have that happen. Or like, I wish I could have my genitals shrunk. Or they said things that like transsexuals would say today, even though transsexualism didn't exist yet.
I'm still, do you see where I'm still having the, you know, the question of like the chicken or the egg, like which came first, right?
Right. Yeah. The chicken and egg thing. It is the in the chicken and egg. Is it between gender identity and the sexual interest? Like which one?
Yes.
The first one.
Exactly. Yep.
Right. Yeah, and I've thought about this, and like we know that like with sexual orientation in general, often kids, like even from the age of like 5 or 6, like they'll have a propensity to have special attachments or longings for other kids that like later line up with their sexual orientation once, you know, after puberty and everything. Like just that even before puberty, your sexual orientation, it might be latent at that time, but it's still influencing your cognition and how you thought and you think and your sentiments about things, even before the overt sexuality makes itself known.
So that's that is assuming that the autogynephilia is a sexuality in and of itself. Do you think that AGP as a sexuality? Do you think that it is kind of intrinsic and kind of unmovable in the same way that maybe homosexuality seems to be intrinsic, unmovable? Or do you think that it is more in line with other paraphilias where it could be like developed?
Yeah, about your question is whether or not it's one that gets imprinted rather than arises from within without imprinting. I personally think it arises without need for imprinting, because it's an attraction. Like, so yeah, like say like allogynephilia, which, you know, that's the attraction to women externally, right? Like, you agree that that exists, right? Allogynephilia,
which is, once again, that's the attraction
to others as women.
Attraction to other people as women. So as in just that, like if you're assigned male at birth, interested in cis women, is that what that is?
Yeah, like regardless of your sex, it's just the women that are allogynephilic are called lesbians, you know?
Okay, gotcha, yeah. Yeah, and your question is, does that exist?
Yeah.
Yes, I believe it does.
Right. And so then there's the question, does this inverted version of it exist? The self-directed version?
Right. And for me to say yes to that, I would have to like agree to ETLE. But here's the thing: is we're saying that okay, I think I see what you're saying here. So like allogynephilia is a paraphilia. It's just a way to say like straight or lesbian. Right.
Right. Yeah. It's not necessarily a paraphilia. It's just a sexual interest, a category of sexual interest.
Okay, gotcha. So maybe that is the kind of the kicker there is how do we use philia? Like, is that something that exclusively works for a paraphilia, or is it just attraction? Does that make sense?
It's just attraction.
It's just attraction. Okay.
It comes from like the Greek word for love.
Yeah, so I agree that that exists. And then along with that, I know enough people who are AGP but not transitioning. And their like arousal to themselves and to the idea of themselves as female seems very, very different to like my arousal patterns. So I would say like, yes, if that's probably a thing. I don't think that it accounts for it would almost be like saying allogynephilia is the reason why the largest majority of men are straight.
Yeah.
And then let's say I'm trying to think of like a behavior beyond that maybe that men would do. Because so we're saying like, okay, somebody who is transsexual, they are basically engaging in a behavior which is like, transitioning or something along those lines. So we're saying that this Autogynephilia trying to think. I'm losing my train of thought here.
You fooled me. I thought you were frozen.
Nah. Oh yeah. Sorry.
So
That's
are you
fine.
like kind of asking like what's the connection between a sexual interest and any like behavioral manifestations or psychological outcomes of it? Like,
I guess that's what I'm trying to get at.
like I'd say like among straight men, there's a huge variety of ways that they express it. Some of them are very crude, and the only question they have is tits or ass. But there's other ones that have like a really deep, heartfelt, emotional longing to like be married to a woman and like share life with her, and like all those sweet feelings. So there's this big variation in sexuality between like the lusty eroticism and then all the emotional attachment and affection aspects, that come with the romantic part.
Okay. Yeah, I think I'm with you there.
And like with that differentiation, I think like transsexual AGP transsexuals are the ones that are more likely to feel those strong romantic parts, like the really strong attachment feelings. Whereas like someone that thought like, oh, this is just a sex thing, they wouldn't value it highly enough to uproot their life to transition. It wouldn't make sense to them.
Okay, so there's basically you're saying that there's like degrees between them.
The what?
There's like degrees between them, possibly. Like, or different, just different like flavors to attraction and that kind of thing.
Yeah, different ways of like attractions can manifest differently based on the person's life experience and personality and their ideas about things and all that.
Mm-hmm. Hold on 1 second. I gotta close this blind because it's burning the heck out of me.
Right.
I'm going to take this as an opportunity to jump right in and control the conversation. Only for time, because I love where we're going with this. It seems like this has been really productive and interesting. I usually end my SEs with some sort of a hypothetical diffuser. So I really, really like the one that Nathan just provided. And I'd like to address it to both of you and have you discuss it. What is the lowest standard of evidence would you need to accept the position of your conversation partner? What kind of thing could convince you to the other's view? Hypothetical, doesn't have to be a real thing.
For me, like if I saw that there was other routes to transsexualism, like if they found one, if they located gender identity in the body and were certain like gender identity comes from this specific anatomical thing and some people are born with different versions, like I would buy that. Like basically if they showed different etiologies, which is to say different causal pathways, different developmental pathways towards developing transsexualism, if scientists found more than the two that I think exist, then I would then update. Okay. I would. Charge typology is not correct at that point. If there was more.
Okay. So I'm hearing that more compelling alternatives is what it would take for you.
Yeah, there'd have to be more other ways that have been demonstrated with sufficient evidence, and then I would date to
and of course, compelling is by your epistemology, which appears to be pretty much aligned with mine in the way you see evidence. So, yay. Cool, we like that. Senator?
So one of the things that Floof just mentioned actually was if we could see other kind of alternatives that might change change their kind of thoughts on this. One of the things that somebody is looking into right now is, and we talked about this on the last stream, which is Autoandrophobia. And I've mentioned that kind of more characterizes like my feelings on the whole thing. And so what they're trying to do now is they're trying to kind of investigate that more. And so if we find out, sometime in the near future where autoandrophobia may be one of the contributing factors, I think that would be pretty interesting. And so I'm very excited to kind of like see what the outcome of that is. If it winds up that autoandrophobia probably, if it is a thing, then that is that would lower my scale of confidence that Blanchard's autogynephilia theory exists, just because, okay, here's another like example of it. On the other side, if it comes back that autoandrophobia is not a thing, it wouldn't necessarily change my claim, which is like a disbelief claim, if that makes sense.
I was just gonna say, what is, what, I guess in line with that question on the screen, what's like the lowest standard of evidence that you would need to see to believe that Blanchard's typology is accurate?
Yeah. So I think one of my biggest gripes with the theory is that I don't really think that there's any way that you could really falsify it. Like, there's how could you explain that it's incorrect other than showing that cross-gender arousal doesn't exist or something along those lines. And it still hasn't reached my my standard of evidence. So the question is more, what is my standard of evidence? Like, what would hit that threshold?
Yeah.
And that is a really, really tough one to answer, honestly.
I don't know in the moment is a perfectly acceptable answer. And with that,
yeah,
if you all like the tone of this show, of these kinds of conversations, I welcome you to come to the Street Epistemology Discord, where you can talk to me and Floof and Senator and hundreds of other of our productive, kind, willing to converse friends on the Street Epistemology Discord. Thank you both for coming, and I'm cutting you off for time. You can continue to talk in the after show. If you like this method of street epistemology, of which we were doing an interesting swirl mix today, I suggest going to streetepistemology.com, brought to you by Street Epistemology International, who also bring you the SE podcast, if you like SE stuck right in your ear without all this faffing about video. Here are 5 of my favorite street epistemology related channels out of a list of about 15 if you go to my YouTube page. Thank you for coming to this vanilla street epistemology. Thank you again to Floof and Kiwi for being the whole show and telling us and teaching me so many new and interesting things and words I hadn't learned in Greek. If you would like to be a guest on my show, I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you very much.